Spider-Man 2000, the game that started it all. All the games that we're going to be looking at in this marathon, that one made possible. But like I said at the end of that review, that wasn't the end for the webhead on PlayStation 1. Just a couple of years after its release, a sequel was made. Enter Electro. Now, this is where things get kind of interesting. See, I've been playing Spider-Man 2000 ever since it came out about 18 years ago, and I've loved it ever since. In fact, it was one of the first games I ever owned, but I haven't played this. Before coming into this review, I've never even seen a physical copy of it, so this is new territory for me. Does it hold up? Is it a worthy successor to one of my favorite games? Let's find out.
With the success of Spider-Man 2000, you would think that Activision would be eager to throw more money at Neversoft to get a sequel going, but things actually played out a little differently than you might think. Neversoft actually didn't come back to develop any more Spider-Man games, which I find surprising because if you remember what I said in the last video, I thought the team knocked it out of the park with Spider-Man 2000. Instead, a developer that helped Neversoft with that game, known as Treyarch, was acquired by Activision in 2001 and put to work on a new Spider-Man game. But not the one we'll be talking about today. No, we'll be getting to that in the next video. What's important to note though is that most of Activision's attention and budget went into that project, but there was still a spark of hope for a Spider-Man 2000 sequel from a developer known as Vicarious Visions, who you might recognize as the team that created the Crash Bandicoot Insane trilogy. The team weren't given the same money or tools that Neversoft had to work with the first game, but nonetheless, they rolled up their sleeves and got to work. While Enter Electro was able to build on many elements of the first game, they were dealing with a limited time frame of their own. The game was working out the engine of the first game and was still being developed for the PlayStation 1, and the PlayStation 2 had already come out. The team was forced to work quickly to release the game before falling victim to obscurity, and that meant there wasn't time to develop a very in-depth story. The plot of Enter Electro is simple. There really isn't much going on here, and the narrative feels a lot more confined than its predecessors, with none of the fun cameos or interesting mysteries to unfold. Either way, let's get into that, and just like last time, spoilers ahead. The plot begins with Electro breaking into a facility known as Biotech and takes off with a device of some kind. Not a very complicated setup, but yeah, that's kind of the theme here. We pick up with our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, who's out on one of his regular patrols, and Beast shows up to give us the very brief and only cameo from another hero we're gonna get in this game. Beast basically just sends the player out on the tutorial of the game, getting the player familiar with the gameplay, which is very similar to that of the first game. Web swinging works the same way as it did last time, and the limited distance you can travel with it is still a bit disappointing, but I find that it's a bit easier to aim the web swing in this game than it was in the original. The web abilities are the same too, but the ground combos have actually gotten a small update. They're no more complicated than before, it's really just an animation swap, but I actually think that the animations made for the kicks are a lot better in this game. They seem to give Spider-Man a better sense of mobility, and that really helps in staying immersed in the experience. After the little crash course on the game mechanics, Spider-Man sees a group of robbers taking off with a briefcase after hitting a location owned by Biotech. Spidey lands a tracing beacon on the leader and proceeds to beat up the thugs in the surrounding area, and holy crap! We're on the ground! Well, that's nice to see. You can actually travel from building tops down to the ground in this and a couple of other levels, and it gives you the feeling of actually operating within a city. The area you're given to work with is a little small, but what you can do within it makes up for it a bit. Actually, that's a good way to describe Enter Electro as a whole. Smaller, but more varied. The rest of the game is all about following the trail of villains like Shocker, Sandman, and Hammerhead as they help Electro steal the parts he needs to complete this contraption known as the BioNexus device. The idea behind the device is that it can amplify the electrical currents inside the human body, so one human being wearing the device could potentially power an entire city block as a self-sustaining energy source. In Electro's hands, the potential power of the BioNexus device is practically limitless, so he's convinced several other villains to help him get what he needs, presumably with the incentive that they can take out Spider-Man in the process, but of course, he stops all of them on his way to Electro. You take out Shocker in a warehouse, break up an evil party at the airfield, hunt down a train while being chased by Sandman, knock out Hammerhead at a ballroom, beat some sense into Dr. Connors, who's turned into the Lizard again, and defeat Sandman back at Biotech. If you think I'm skipping out on the story beats here, I'm really not. This game moves at a breakneck pace, and things just kind of happen in very quick succession. You arrive at a location, knock some thugs around, and complete some sort of task or puzzle. Take out the villain of that area, and move on. Like I said before though, what makes it all worth it is the variety. In one city block, you're gathering keys to deactivate a bomb. At the airfield, you're trying to find a way to safely slow down this plane to save the pilot. At the ballroom, you're trying to locate and free hostages. You're actually doing something different in just about every level, and I think that's where Enter Electro really shines. Vicarious Visions really put work into making sure that nothing felt too tedious or repetitive, and there is nothing in this game that even approaches the insanity that the sewers from the first game made me feel. The bosses fare pretty well too, making you use the environment around you as a means to take out each one that you face. Hold down heavy crates on Shocker, soak Sandman in water, or just completely destroy the place with Hammerhead. This kind of boss design is something that I think the first game could have used a bit more of. Instead of just standing around and waiting for a boss to play an idle animation so you can hit them, you're constantly taking the initiative and damaging the enemy. One especially creative boss encounter is with the Lizard, in which you have to actually finish developing a cure for Dr. Connor's condition and fire it at him with your web shooters before beating him into submission. Which actually brings up a mechanic that was brought back in Enter Electro that I kind of failed to mention in the last review. You see, in Spider-Man 2000, there were places in the later levels where you could pick up fire cartridges that would add a flame effect to your webbing, which was really useful against symbiotes, especially if you wanted some sort of nightmare fuel. While you don't get flame webs in Enter Electro, you can pick up these ice cartridges that add a freezing effect to your webbing, and it's not worth it. Gotta be blunt here, I really don't see a benefit in using these. If you web up an enemy, they just get taken out of commission, so freezing them in place like this just feels counterintuitive. Of all the gameplay elements Vicarious Visions decided to bring into play here, this feels like the most useless one for sure. Speaking of useless, after Electro has gotten what he needs from the villains you've taken out, he's frustrated to discover that the device won't work properly without some kind of energy source. I kinda thought that the person wearing the stupid thing was the energy source, but okay. Maybe it's like a conduit or relay or something? I don't know. After kidnapping the creator of the device, Dr. Watts, Electro interrogates her until she tells him that the BioNexus device requires a large sapphire in order to work properly. And as luck would have it, a sapphire of that exact description is being displayed that night at a nearby museum. Who would have thunk? Spider-Man discovers this information for himself over at Dr. Watts' lab before the Sandman boss fight, and after taking Flint Marko out to a nice pool party, rushes over to the museum to confront the lunatic. Electro, still holding Dr. Watts hostage, brings a bunch of samurai statues to life. Not gonna question that. And after reducing them to scrap, Spidey follows Electro up this tall shaft and the two finally fight in the observatory. After the battle, Electro offers Spider-Man an ultimatum: the Jewel or Dr. Watts. The Arachnid agrees to make the deal and tries to pull a fast one on Electro, but it fails, and the BioNexus device is activated. Spider-Man gives chase and confronts Electro on top of these buildings. It's a neat fight. Spider-Man's costume is torn heavily, and you need to take out this large tower so Electro can't heal himself anymore. After that's done, you have to use these devices over here to trick Electro into short-circuiting himself. Not one of the best fights in the game, but still pretty memorable. Interestingly enough though, the conclusion of this game was supposed to play out a bit differently. The game was, again, being developed back in 2001. And the final confrontation between the two characters was originally intended to take place on top of the World Trade Center. Yeah. After the events in September of that year, this understandably needed to be changed, and the developers were forced to rush in some quick changes, removing cutscenes and altering the appearance of the location, even removing the appearance of Thor, who was supposed to show up after the fight was over, which is referenced in one of these Daily Bugle papers that appear between levels as a quick gag. Spider-Man doesn't seem to think it's all that funny, and after tossing the paper away, he swings off to continue his never-ending work, and the villains are left in prison with Electro whining about his failures, and the story closes out with this fun little nod to the first game.
You know any other games? All I know is poker.
Nah, but maybe they know a few. Hey! You guys know how to play Go Fish?
So, yeah, not quite as complicated as last time. Not as long either. I sat down to play this game for the first time and had it beaten in like 3 or 4 hours. Still, there's extra content just like last time, with costumes to unlock, comic book covers to view, and you can even mix and match the appearance of Spider-Man and swap out the different abilities that the alternate costumes give you, which I think is a nice touch.
So, do I recommend Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro? Yes. But not to everyone.
The new mechanics are fun, and I really do enjoy the gameplay variety, but some missions do hold up better than others, and then you have stuff like the freeze webbing that just doesn't serve a purpose. The presentation feels like it took a hit too. The cutscenes look fine for the most part, but sometimes models look really goofy, and at other times the animations just don't look like they're moving right. The voice performances are not as strong as before either. The voice actor for Spider-Man has returned and sounds just as good as last time, but not everyone fares that well. In the last review, I commended Darren Norris for his voice performance, but in this game?
Yeah, plans and speeches are all well and good, but I think you're forgetting about one thing: Spider-Man.
Yeah, there's a gap in quality there. The music here isn't bad, but it just doesn't hit the mark like the soundtrack from the first game. I know that all of this might have sounded pretty harsh, but beneath all of the issues is a game that's legitimately fun to play, and I really can't commend the variety and activities enough. What really drives home what I like so much about this game is the credit sequence where Spider-Man is crawling past the different team members who worked on the game and making a quick joke about each of them. There's heart here, some real passion that came from the developers, and you can really tell that they cared about what they were working on and had a great time with it, and how can I not respect that? Still, I can't recommend this game to everyone. If you had a good time playing the first game and want to see a direct follow-up, or if you're just a really big Spider-Man fan, I'd say give it a shot, but otherwise, I'm not sure you would get a whole lot out of this, and I would have to suggest that you look for your Spider-Man gaming fix somewhere else. I feel a little bit bad for how hard I grilled this game, but as much as I enjoy it, I need to be fair and point out the good and the bad. I still think Vicarious Visions was able to do quite a lot, considering how much they had going against them, between last-minute changes and the support of Activision being placed elsewhere. Which reminds me,
Now, it was around the time that Enter Electro released that things really changed in pop culture for Spider-Man. And it was all thanks to Sam Raimi. So that means in the next episode, we're going to be taking a look at Spider-Man, the movie, the game. Thank you so much for watching, ladies and gentlemen. See you next mission.